Hey guys, sorry for the delay in that and the break in the video. My dog jumped on my computer as I was giving this, so it caused it to shut off. So as I was saying, goals need to be timely in nature too, so that you can have an end date to measure whether you were successful or not. I like the addition to the SMART goals mentality from leadership thought leader Michael Hyatt. Michael Hyatt added an ER to the end of it to where SMART goals are, how he says, smarter goals. Uh, it should be, his in the smarter is that it's exciting, right? This should be a goal that moves the needle for your company. And so uh, you're intrigued, and it's in your best interest to focus on having a quality website. And then finally, the R in this, the final R is that it's risky, right? This is not a goal that would just happen if you just made any old website. This should be a goal that you might not hit. It should be challenging to hit. I think that's what can also make a great website. And heck, it's a great mentality for any type of goal setting as well. Number four, it's important to just walk a mile in your customer's shoes, right? So often we're too close to our company, or we're too close to our industry, perhaps, that we design a website like we would want to use it. Well, keep in mind that your website is there to help your consumer, right? So don't design the website for what you would want to see as an owner. It might be wise to communicate with some actual consumers in your industry, identify what it is that they want to see in website, and design it with them in mind, right? Design the format, design the verbiage with how your customers think in mind. The line that I always say to my clients at my agency is, if it's hard to become your customer, why should your customers think it's easy to be your customer? Right? So, we don't want to make the onboarding process on a website difficult for them. Finally, then it's trying to draw insights from some competitive websites. Right? This is where you don't need to necessarily start by a completely independent, brand new website that doesn't look anything like your competitors. But I also think it's dangerous to start by simply seeking to recreate a competitor's website, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you should not start by copying another site, right? First, what you should do is define your goals, and then you can start looking at other websites to decide, all right, what are some of the features? What are some of the components that I like about other websites? All right, let's take you through the process now of how to create a website that actually wins. This is the process that when I create websites, what we actually do to decide. All right, what in the creation of the website, we've done our planning, we've done our initial work for what we want in the website. Here's what we do to actually make it. First thing that we do is collect all of the vital, what I call the vital information for the company. This is where we collect all of the branding essentials, right? Your logos, your company colors that are exact, right? The tagline of your company, the mission statement, any important, branding essentials that you have. You define what the personality of your website is going to be. Is it professorial? Is it tongue in cheek, funny? What's the personality and the voice, right? What you're reading right now and nicely said can be incredibly helpful in this regard. Define what the non-negotiables for your site are. What are the things that your website absolutely has to have, right? Is it a seamless checkout process? Is it the ability to collect email addresses? What is it that are the non-negotiables of your site? Finally, whether you're an internal, you're making this website internally at your own company, or whether you're an agency working from the outside, it's important to make a team for this, right? Who is the person who you're going to be collaborating with? Is it a designer? If you're an agency, is it somebody internally in the company who's going to be your point of contact to retrieve information from? Next we do what I call the information architecture phase. This is essentially the blueprints of your website. Imagine you're doing the blueprints of a house. This isn't where we're deciding where the sofa, the chairs are going. This is the blueprint, like you see before any of that goes in, right? We're putting the walls in place for the house version. So on a website, imagine you're drawing your website on a whiteboard, right? This is where we're going to want the logo. These are the different tabs that we want. Here's where the drop down menu is going to go. Where our picture is going to be laid out. Where are our opt-in buttons? Things like that. Imagine you with your information architecture. Like I said, imagine just a blueprint of a building, and this is something that literally you could draw. There should be no coding needed on your site. This is just how your website is organized and labeled. Next, you're going to actually map your pages out, right? So this is where we're putting the table and chairs in place, right? So this is where we're going to map our content with on our page. We're going to start orienting the room. This is the interior designer type phase, right? So ensuring that your content is designed with multiple platforms in mind, both mobile and desktop, right? Ensuring that when your website scales down to size, because it'll be, when it's mobile responsive, what is it that I'm wanting that to look like, and ensuring that as you're creating, you're checking that and everything, right? Ensuring what type of website you think your audience would prefer. Do they want a more image heavy site that would mimic Pinterest or an Instagram page? Or is it important that you largely have a website that has a lot more text on it? Keep in mind that websites that the consumers really engage with are shaped like the letter F or Z, or they're read like the letter F or Z. If you can see my cursor at all on my screen, right? Imagine that real estate on the top bar and the real estate in the middle of your page right before you scroll up or scroll down. That's the most valuable real estate on your website. So your calls to action should be prominent in there. You should have a clear, concise, punchy tagline that's listed there. You should have all of your opt-ins be able to be seen there. Keep in mind that the information, what we would call above the fold, or above the before the scroll, above the fold. Imagine that like a newspaper. That is the most important thing on your website. And then once again here, it's important to revisit those objectives. What is it that I'm actually hoping that my target market gets out of this? As you're producing website content, it's easy to forget those objectives. So I think as you're actually putting words on a page, it's important to revisit those objectives. Next, you're going to want to think about your CMS, your content management system, right? Obviously, this needs to be mobile compatible and mobile friendly from the start. Most are at this point, unless you're hard coding this in. And at that phase, you'll want to make sure that you're mobile compatible. But it's important to understand as you're making this that a CMS, doesn't necessarily exist on a what I would call a vertical hierarchy, right? I would argue that one content management system is not necessarily better than another. They just all can have their own purposes and unique goals, right? So when I say this, these are things like leveraging a template-based tool like a Squarespace or Wix, or something to that end, versus hard coding a website yourself or utilizing WordPress, things like that. Certainly, tools like WordPress or hard coding a site allows you more features, but research has shown that CMSs are 7 times more likely due to fail because a lack of an internal fit, right? Versus a lack of features. While certainly you can do more things on a WordPress based site or a hard coded site, right? Maybe your cultural fit is that you need edits made quickly and cheaply, and you don't want to have to pay a coder. You don't have the knowledge of coding to build this website yourself, and so it makes more sense for your small business to use a templated website like a Squarespace. I see that for a lot of my small business clients. That just makes more sense to them than a WordPress based site, right? So anecdotal evidence shows that projects go that look like they could be successful initially, right? We've got a great looking website can quickly go off the rails if the CMS can accommodate how the organization actually works. So, the need to produce, strong edits in an efficient manner. So make sure to pay attention to what you actually want your website to do, because it might change which CMS you actually end up choosing. Right, next we're actually going to start really designing a website. Right, we've kind of mapped everything. We've made the information architecture where we've designed the layout. We've maybe created we've picked out our furniture, right, for lack of a better term, in the mapping section. We've decided what we're going to use to actually build the website, our tools. Right now, it's finally time to design that. Right, sorry, I clicked ahead too quickly. Right, so this is where we're actually building the site. You've purchased Squarespace, or you've gotten WordPress kick-started and everything, and you're actually putting things into place at this point. Right after you're done doing all of that, right, you've got what looks to be a completed website. I would argue that you're not done at this point, that you need to review this for search engine optimization. Right, a website is only as good as its ability to be found by people online. And so you need to pay attention to how people are finding this via a search engine. Right, are your keywords prominently used throughout the site? You might want to look at Google's keyword planner to see what are the most trafficked words in your industry. Ensuring that your content is of significant quality, that you've got your blog in place correctly, that you've spelled everything correctly, things like that, that your website pages are linkable, and that you've got a significant amount of inbound links that you can have to your website, right? So where other websites are linking to you, and that they'd have a reason to link to this certain page on your website, that it's got clear and compelling content, and that you have a significant level of outbound links as well. Google doesn't like dead-end streets. Google likes circular streets that provide a good path for the consumer. So, make sure that, you provided good quality outbound links to other websites if that's relevant for you too. Make sure that your URLs that you produce are clear. We don't want abc.com/1234567 right? We'd rather have abc.com/state of the union, right? To where it's clear, it's short. Search engines like that. They like they like a clear, concise URL. Ensure that alt text is placed behind all of your images, right? Google can't read pictures, so we need to tell them what that image is referring to, so that it shows up properly in search engines. ensuring that all of your meta tagging is done correctly, depending on your CMS that you use. A lot of this is probably, some of that meta tagging, I shouldn't say a lot, some of this meta tagging can be done for you. Then ensuring all of your social media platforms are set up and that are linked to from your website, and that you've set up all of your necessary review sites. Make sure that you set up your Google My Business page. Quite obviously, if Google cares about it enough to, set up Google My Business, it certainly affects your search engine results. So make sure that you've got that set up as well. If you're a medical practice, that your health grades and things like that, vitals, things like that are set up as well. Right, next you'll want to do a relationship review. Right, how is it that you're wanting your website to engage with your consumers? Right, so if you're not wanting to have chat functionality, if you're not willing to keep that up, a chat function, you don't need to put that on your website. How are you wanting them to actually communicate with you? Is it via email? Well, then maybe you need to have a form on your website, and make sure that you're willing to answer them with that. It's nothing is worse than when you reach out to a company in the way that they wanted you to, and they don't answer you back in a timely fashion. Next, you'll want to test your website, right? Does it work? Are the words spelled correctly? Have you purchased an SSL certificate? Not only does an SSL certificate keep your website safe, Google has freely admitted that in this day and age of significant amounts of website hacks, that they are considering a security of your website as part of its search engine results. So it's easily worth the $30 a year for that. Do your measurement tools work? Do you have Google Analytics installed correctly? Is your Facebook pixel installed on your website? If you're selling things, is your Google tracking pixel installed correctly? And then, can someone else use it, right? Let somebody else who is not you, and I would tell you who's not your wife or your child, someone who's willing to tell you that something stinks, or your husband or your child, somebody who's willing to be incredibly candid and honest with you, to tell you if something is wrong with your site. Let them use it and tell you what doesn't make sense, and listen to them with an open heart. Finally, it's time to launch your website to the public, right? Finally, you're at this point, I think that you can put this public, right? And then your job at that point, though, it isn't done, in my opinion. At that point, it's time to begin to optimize your website, right? Paying attention to your analytics and seeing how you can continue to get better and better. Right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And if you can't manage it, you can't scale it. So having Google Analytics installed on your website is pivotal for your success. You can track things like volume, your visitors on your website, ensuring that you've got a properly set conversion funnel, right? Seeing how you measure up in terms of search engine optimization, right? You might even want to have some heat mapping installed on your website. But with heat mapping in the form of Google Analytics, I use that as a catch-all term to say, which pages are stickiest on your website, right? And then you can look at your e-commerce functionality with your Google Analytics as well. See which items are performing best. You can pay attention to your shopping cart data at this point, things like that. Right, so your ongoing optimization needs to include things like A/B testing. When you do A/B testing, I think this is a great visualization of this. Right, A/B tests are where you change one specific variation on your website, where 50% of your consumers see one form of this variation, and 50% of your consumers see another form of this variation, right? So in this visualization, the box is either red or green here, and half of people see the one and half saw the other. What's important to know with A/B testing, first, is that these tests only happen one at a time, right? We're not affecting the bottom rectangle on this visualization. We're only testing that top right rectangle, right? Because otherwise your test can become convoluted. What variability were they actually reacting to? Or was it a combination of the variables? Right? It's important to only test one thing at a time. It's important to know that these tests should be simultaneous, right? If they're not simultaneous, perhaps it was something else that was causing your consumers to behave differently. Perhaps it was the time of year or a specific day of the week or things like that, right? So make sure that these tests are happening simultaneously. Finally, a test is only as good as its ability to act on it, right? You need to draw insights from your A/B test and then change it, and then continue to test after that, right? A test is only as good as its ability to be acted upon. Right, as you guys saw on your syllabus, I'm obviously you're keeping up with that religiously. You've got a quiz this week. So with your quiz number 2 that you're doing, a fairly simple exercise. I want you to rewind this lecture to the very beginning where we talked about the 4 objectives that you have for a website. Right? Imagine that your boss has asked you to make a brand new website for the company that you worked, right? And if you don't have a full-time position, if you're a full-time student, pick a company. It's totally fine. Define what the purpose of what you think the purpose of the website should be, using those categories that I provided you. Right after you've defined what that is, the purpose of your website should be, I'd just like you to go through the quick exercise of making smarter goals for the site. Right? Define what specific goals you'd have for your website. How are you going to measure the success of your website? What are the actionable things that you would hope would change from your old website to the new website? Right, so go through that smarter goal setting process with creating a website, and just write those down. This can, I'm more than happy to work with you. If you have any questions on this, just please feel free to reach out via email. This will be due by next Wednesday at midnight. Guys, I hope you have a great week. Please feel free to reach out for anything I can do to be helpful. Go Mocs!